Hello everyone, and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am your host, Jeane Slone, and the author of 3 historical fictions, She Flew Bombers, She Built Ships During World War II, and the newly published She Was an American Spy. Today in the studio, I would like to welcome Zak Zaikine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here.
Oh, I'm very happy to be here, and also with all the rain that is going on out there, we're finally getting that nurturing quality for our beautiful landscape.
How true.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about Zak. I'm speaking to our audience.
Okay.
Zak's father was a noted Russian muralist painter, and he painted on scaffoldings in churches. You got to watch that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And before we start, this is my creative little cap that a really good, wonderful craftsperson, Carol Curnow, creates. And I always wear it when I'm making wonderful creations. Yeah, my dad was, when I was 25, my best friend gave me a copy of Michelangelo's life, The Agony and the Ecstasy. I think it was Irving Stone who wrote it. And I said, I don't need that book. I already experienced that. Because he would actually build the scaffolding after he was commissioned by the churches throughout the country and climb up there and paint these incredible mystical Marys and St. Peter's. And then lunchtime would come, or he needed a particular brush because the scaffolding could only hold a certain amount of paint and brushes. He'd drop a rope down to me or a string, and I would tie his lunch, and he would pull it up. And the experience is, there's no way to even express that particular experience.
I can certainly picture it in my mind, how you explain it, though. You also had Russian icons in every room in your house when you were growing up, and candles almost in every room.
Yes, it was the spiritual side of the Russian people is immense. And the Orthodox, once the Iron Curtain actually fell, and the majority of people now in Russia are Orthodox. And the group of people that I was baptized actually broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. And it was a very interesting experience. In my first marriage, back in the early 60s, if you weren't Catholic, you actually, marrying a Catholic, you couldn't be at the altar at the same height. So, but my baptismal certificate reads, Russian Greek Orthodox Catholic Reform, that broke away from the Catholic Church in the 1794. The Pope actually gave me a dispensation to get married at the altar, but I had to be one step down.
Lots of stories.
Yes.
Well, you have won quite a number of awards for your artwork. It's very impressive. You were awarded the New York City Artist Fellowship Foundation Award in 2005 and 2009. You were also awarded the New York City Pollock Krasner Grant in 2007 for your artwork, and the New York City Adolph and Esther Gottlieb Foundation Grant in 2006 and 2009. And Zak, your artwork is in museums and private public collections throughout the world. And we, as a public, are very fortunate that you share your artwork with us through many children's books. So tell me, how many children's books have you illustrated?
Well, right now in publication, there is 5. The one that I'm just about finished, we get a couple more inches of rain, and it'll help me to finalize the editing, and it's actually called Dancing by the Light of the Moon. And I wrote it 12 years ago when we also had quite a lot of rain. In fact, we had so much rain that I decided to send the fishes that were jumping out of the creeks in front of my house and all over Sonoma County to the moon for a vacation. And so they journeyed to the Sea of Tranquility for their particular vacation. So we'll just kind of keep it at that in the rest of the story. And that should be, within about 6 months, that should be out. But right now, there are 5 children's books that I've illustrated, and 4 of those I've written myself. And besides, you had mentioned in terms of my art, we have the most wonderful gallery out in Bodega. And the man's name is Lorenzo, who owns it. And he carries not only my children's books, but he also carries close to about 100 of all of my art, because I work in also different medias, as you mentioned. And he has a wonderful overview of what I do, which is making art all the time.
This is good for our audience to know, because then they can go to Bodega, to that gallery, and see your artwork. What is the name of the gallery again?
It's the Bodega Landmark Studio.
Good.
And it's interesting because once I'm not a Republican, but once when I was just starting out in life, the Republicans wanted me as the mayor of New York City. And so I went to a couple of rallies, and they sort of gave me how I should be talking politically. So I always remember particular numbers. So Lorenzo's number is 707-876-3477.
Wow.
But I'm not running for any office. I just want to continue to just
Well,
create.
speaking of numbers, your art spans 52 years. That's how long you've been an artist.
Actually, if we can make an adjustment,
Okay.
that's professionally speaking.
Yes.
Okay. But actually, if selling your work means that you're professional, I sold my first piece at 4 years of age. I lived in a tenement in Queens, Long Island, and my neighbor would take turns babysitting, and my mom would also be working, so I would babysit, with her children. And one day I was drawing Mickey Mouse, because I love the comics, and the neighbor saw it and said, "Wow, it looks just like Mickey Mouse. Do you think I could have it?" And I said, "Well, if I give it to you, then I don't have it. But give me a piece of paper and I'll draw it, and if you give me 25 cents, you can have one." And so that started it really all. But yes, it was very interesting too, is that tomorrow will be the anniversary of the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
I did hear about that.
And I worked for Pan Am, and they asked me to work that day, February 9th, back in 1964, because the Beatles were arriving on Pan Am. And there was at least 20,000 kids, mostly, young girls. And I said, no, I don't think, I worked enough overtime, so I didn't do it. But it was a wonderful experience to interact with celebrities from all over the world.
Well, I think our audience would be very interested to hear some of your poetry.
Oh, sure.
And the poetry book is called?
This is I Love You.
I Love You.
And it's actually the first book that I was published, and I couldn't believe it when I sent the copyright. I copyrighted it, I Love You, in 1969. And I'm thinking, since the Gutenberg Bible was produced back in the 14th century, how many billions of books, and nobody had ever copyrighted I Love You. So I feel very honored that I had the copyright. And this is actually the edition. This is a rare edition. When I was moving from one of my locations where I live to Big Sur, I packaged up a number of these, and we just found them. So this is a rare copy of the last edition published in 1979. So I've got a few of these left. This is, it's dedicated actually to all the women in my life. And they have been so supportive, and I'm so thrilled that finally the male is allowing the female to come out, because we have male and female. As a matter of fact, the energy now is that the male really needs to be supported. And we have, and this is what you're providing for us, not only what you're doing as a writer, because from what I'm hearing is that the titles of your books were inspired by a family member, maybe?
Yes, somewhat. But I do like to write about powerful women of the 40s.
Yes.
They got a short window of time to be powerful, and that was about it.
Yes. And so we can now look forward to our second woman president.
Think so, huh?
Yeah, because I feel our first, and you can see how powerful Eleanor was.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so in my personal belief, Eleanor was when he got his stroke. And so now with Hillary, it just feels really, really wonderful that we're returning to this balance as we once had in the matriarchal, and we've had this patriarchal for just too long. So we can lighten up a little bit, okay? You guys out there?
Well, let's hear a love poem, especially since Valentine's Day is coming up.
Okay. This is called A Real Friend. We touch, and it's enough. You speak, and I'm fulfilled. I smile, and you are happy. We laugh, and somehow we know. Somehow.
Poems are amazing. You can say just very few words and get a large message.
One day, the day was meant to be spent with flowers and trees, a stretch of grass. The hours passed quickly that day. A momentary fantasy kept pace with the rising sun, but still my space was empty. Then you came by and sat beside me. How long has it been since you've wanted a friend? Oh yes, I'm glad you came by.
Oh, sweet.
This is one that I met somebody that fell in love with my art, and he just was so connected, and I brought it to his house, and he had a sculpture on his piano, and he asked me, he says, put yours up there. I sat in his living room, kind of very much like this, but it was a big couch. And so I said, I really don't want to pick that up. He says, no, just pick it up. So he just grabs it, and it was a major sculptor that was very prominent in the 1800s. And it looked like I was going to pull its head off, you know. And he said, now that, I like that. And he was a very industrious type of individual, but his passion was roses. And so he could be a business person on the couch when we were negotiating, because he said, I want to buy it all. And then he gave me a pencil, and he said, now give me a good number for everything. So I gave him a number. He said, that's not my number. And I said, but that's my number. He says, so he gave me the pencil back, and he says, now give me a good number. So I gave him a good number and added $2,000 to the number I had originally given him. And he said, you want to come and work for me? And I said, no. He says, well, I'm buying them all. Can we go back to the low number? And I says, sure. He says, now I want to show you my roses. And he had 249 different varieties. And he talked to each one. And he nurtured it. And this is a poem to him. Grace, nice, isn't it? Really nice, isn't it? Make you feel like you're alive. Make you feel you understand. Make you feel you want to care. Make you feel you're wanted here. Make you feel the world is right. You made me feel this dear tonight.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I wanted to ask you about one of your daughters is also an artist.
Yes.
And you both exhibited together.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, first of all, the magical bonding that I have with her is really indescribable. I decided that I wanted to deliver her. And so we lived on a ranch outside. I was a caretaker for a ranch out in Healdsburg. And so I made sure that I went through, there was a center in Cotati called the Death and Birth Center. And I went through 3 trimesters to learn everything that I could about a woman. But I wasn't so fanatically crazy about delivering my kid that I didn't know the route to the hospital just in case. And I had a midwife. And it was wonderful because my partner, my wife, actually ripped in the last couple of minutes. And that was the one thing I would have sewn her up, but I didn't do that. But in terms of my daughter, the bonding that we have and the exhibitions that we've had, she actually had her first one-person show at a gallery in the Presidio when she was 2.5. And hasn't stopped since. She is the head gardener for the Waldorf School in Mountain View. And she also then is now giving the kids that are involved, and I believe there's almost 300 kids, if I'm not mistaken, that interact with her about how to properly grow, drainage, build baskets, the Waldorf school system, which I was on the very first committee back in 1975. We met at the library here in Santa Rosa to form the first one, which is the Waldorf one at Summerfield. And the exhibition is that I thought that I had a little cutting edge at being an artist. And then one day, my daughter said to me when she was, I believe, 6, one day, Dad, I'm going to be able to draw like you. And it hit me like a stone. I said, oh my gosh, I lost it. I said, no, I want to be able to continue to draw like you and be like you. And then that fostered a relationship where we exhibited for the next 20 years. And then when we had this show in Mendocino, it was a kind of a fulfillment of creating together. In fact, we've even made art where I make part of it and then she makes part of it. And where I would do etchings, and it would take me maybe 15, 20 minutes to actually, if I was actually drawing you, to capture you. And my daughter would be making 10 of them by the time I made one. And they were as good, if not even more powerful than my own.
Oh, that must be remarkable to be an artist, and your daughter is also an artist, and to work together. I was wondering about two events that occurred. How did the 9/11 event affect your artwork?
It's very direct for me personally, because I have, when it comes to the spoken word, I have always felt that the traveling storyteller would come to a town, 700, 800 years ago, and they would wait for news from another town, and he would create and weave a story. And so I finally found somebody, because my fairy tales are spoken first. I speak them. I create them. I am them. And I was at an art show, and I helped the person next to me who was in this art show. He was a musician, Bruce Kernow. And in fact, his wife makes these wonderful hats for me with my design. And he said, I have a recording studio. And I said, well, I want to record one of my first fairy tales. And we made the arrangement for September 12th, 2001. And I decided that I needed to go into meditation for that weekend before. So I went where there's no phones, no electricity. And there are wild boars where I am. And I go out into nature, and I'm laying there in the grass, and I can hear the boars coming closer. So I start snorting to them, because I've lived in places with a lot of boars. In fact, that's going to be a real good story, but it won't be boring.
Doesn't sound boring.
So the feeling, I came back, and I really don't watch that much television. I like baseball because I actually played it, and I was going to be a professional baseball player, and I loved the game so much, you didn't have to pay me at all. So I called my friend who I work with artistically, and I said, Bud, it sounds like Death Warrant's over. He says, Zach, he says, turn on television on. We're being attacked. And I said, you're very convincing. I said, he says, I know you don't listen to the radio, but we're actually there. And I said, I feel very, very touched, because my ancestors had to go through something similar, even worse, because they only had a couple of hours to escape Russia when the revolt happened. There was a knock on the door, and they didn't grab their VCRs or what they had back then. It was escape. So I called Bruce, and I said, Bruce, what should we do? Should we cancel and set another time? He said, no, this is now the time. Your stories are going to be even more important. And he set up the studio, And I told the story on the first set, which is something that I'm told doesn't really happen, but it so moved me, and having this, say, in my ancestral DNA also. And the CD now, I think, has gone through 6 or 7 editions. And then Bruce wrote the music for it, and I get fan mail from people all over saying that after I hear the story before I go to bed, the music puts me to sleep, and I don't have to take any extra melatonin or what have you.
So you have a special CD that you have produced.
Yes.
And what is the title of that CD?
It's Pearls of Wisdom.
Pearls of Wisdom.
It's that we're all pearls, all of us. And right now, astrologically speaking or metaphorically speaking, we're at a time where everything is now coming together. We will finally get close to ending war, the atrocities, of that, to equalize equal pay, for everybody, and to really be a free country. And I'm not going to go, into political situations, because everybody is in this together. We are still the shining light, in a sense, in the world. The thing is that all we need to do is to really focus on what is the most important thing. And if everybody just simply does their own business for them, take care of themselves, you can't help but contribute. It's my most favorite word is the greater mashpucha, the extended family. And
Do you put a lot of your philosophy into your children's books?
yes, I do.
I thought that you probably did. I also note that you use animals mostly in your children's books. This is an insect,
Yes.
but do you have a special affinity to
Yes,
certain animals or all animals?
All animals. The thing is that they love you unconditionally, as opposed to humans, that we've gone away from our tribal situation. And now we're trying to get back to that. So we're doing it through texting, through Facebook, through Twitter, through all of this situation. And even meditation is kind of back on the rise. I remember when I came in contact with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who actually brought transcendental meditation here to this country. And the feeling is that basically life really is for free. I don't get up early in the morning and go to a room or my bathroom and stick my arm to drain some blood for creativity, giving 4 pints of blood for creativity. It's just here. It's always here. And to know that if you follow what you are meant to follow, it may take you 40, 50 years to do that. But now we're in a situation where we're getting in touch with ourselves. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, being connected to what's in your heart and not what's in your heart. But know that you have what's in your heart is blessed, whether there is an omnipresence or we're part of the omnipresence. We are. And all of a sudden now, with tears of joy coming from the heavens, we might really get to spend the next few hundred years in a very beautiful place, because this is our Garden of Eden. And how people have viewed it for the last 2,000 years is a situation where we're bordering on utilizing a power that we don't even have any idea that exists, but we all have it. So
I like how you're able to put your wonderful spiritual philosophy in your children's books, and I think that's why they continue to sell very well. People want and need that spirituality. You also, I know it's very important to you that your books are earth-friendly.
yes.
Why would you call them earth-friendly?
Well, I started recycling back, if actually this is my first recycled book, Thinking of You. And I actually published and printed the book back in '72. And in those days, nobody really was recycling. And so I found a mill in Washington State, and I paid extra money to have it printed, because basically we live on a planet that's alive, and she's alive. And I could never understand why we would go into her and take her blood out. And so as a result,
You use recycled papers.
and then soy-based things.
And soy-based.
And soy-based things.
Yes.
So if your child decides to eat the book,
Which they do.
yes, and there's going to be no problems. Also, my greeting cards, in a pinch. I remember when I first had to go out and market it, and it was just now starting, and there was like 10% post, recycling. So the person would come out and said, my company wants to handle greeting cards that are recycled. So who's got recycled? And 4 salesmen would leave. Then they would come out and says, my boss just said we want 20% recycled. 2 more people would leave.
Oh.
Okay, so then they got to me, and I said, well, mine's 100% recycled. So they bought it sight unseen, because it was just, and,
Well, you were right on the cusp.
yeah.
Where can people buy your lovely children's books?
There's quite a number of places. The Buggy Bee, the only place right now is Lorenzo's out in Bodega Bay at the gallery I mentioned,
Yeah.
the landmark. It's right across the street from the post office.
Oh, good.
Okay, he has all my books there, and they're also signed and autographed. And all my books, the first edition, there's only 500 produced. And so they're numbered, hand numbered, and then hand signed. And there's sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually put a drawing, into the book itself. And this is something that people really love to have, plus I might dedicate it, to them.
Yeah.
But there's places that are, well, can you mention your places?
Yes. The local authors distribution has all your books in all the local shops. There's about 17 local coffee shops and even health clubs that are carrying your books, and they're listed in the Sonoma County Gazette. And you'll see it in the Gazette. It says, buy local authors' books here.
Yeah, and also Corks.
Corks?
Yeah, they have it. And
Good.
of course, because I'm local and I really, really support, local establishments myself, but in a pinch, Amazon and Borders. In fact, I just discovered that people are reselling my books.
Oh, yeah.
And and my art is being resold on a secondary market. So anytime I'm feeling low or I need a little, instead of having a whiskey sour, I can just go on Google and see, something that I created 30, 40 years ago being
wonderful.
sold. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on WriterSpeak, Zak. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Well, it was a pleasure here. Namaste.
Namaste. WriterSpeak is produced at C Media Labs in Santa Rosa. I would really like to thank our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette. Please join us next time for an exciting episode with another local author.